It's happening right now. I'll let you know when it is live so you can say a proper good morning. Okay, looks like we are live.
We don't have Senator Kitchell.
We do
Nope.
not.
Not yet. Okay. Well, okay. All right. Well, let's rock and roll then.
Okay.
Joe,
Good morning.
Was it yours this morning, Joe?
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
And good morning. And for the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. And somehow I just knocked myself out of the meeting.
We
gotta
see you.
find- Yeah, but I don't see you. I have no idea what I'm doing now. Hang on, please. I apologize. Oh, dear. Well, I
can share it. Want me to?
Yes, I was all prepared to do that. I really apologize. Hang on, maybe I can do it. I just can't see the dashboard for the Zoom meeting anymore to find the share logo. I have no idea what I've done.
Hold on. Let's see if you're. I did share with you, correct?
Here
You
we
are
go.
co-host. You're okay?
I'm back.
Okay.
I need to stop pushing buttons. Okay. So anyway, let me start again, please.
Wait, do you want me to put on your? Do you want me to put your? Do you want me to take care of your presentation? Or are you going to do it?
I was going to try to do it.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay,
So
great. Perfect.
let me
I'll
try to
be
do
your
that.
backup.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And now I just need to get it back up to the beginning. Okay. Again, good morning. Thank you for your time with us today. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. With me today are Chief Engineer Wayne Simmons, Deputy Chief Engineer Ann Gamble, Finance Director Wayne Gamble, Commissioner Manoli from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and Policy Planning and Intermodal Director Michelle Boomhauer, and the CFO of the agency, Lenny LeBlanc. And I was trying to see others when I canceled my screen. So if there's others from the agency that are on the call that I haven't named, if you might just please speak out and introduce yourself. Okay, it appears as though I've covered the list of AOT attendees. So we're here to give you a review of the as recommended 22 budget for the agency. I believe you all have electronic copies as well. And if not, we will certainly, well, I think you do because Liz has it. So we will get started. The fiscal 22 budget for the Agency of Transportation, as recommended, is $680,760,427. It's a 3.7% increase over the fiscal 21 as passed budget. We have done this with no fees or taxes proposed. Obviously, there was a significant influx of federal money, both in 21, which helped position us to craft this budget, and then late in December, which has impacted this budget significantly as well. And we will speak to all those elements further through. But again, the highlight here is this budget, and at this price, this budget is, I believe, the second largest budget in the agency history, only surpassed by 1 year of following Tropical Storm Irene. Budget pressures, of course, continue. We do have salaries and benefits impacts year over year, as does every agency. The retirement contributions, of course, continue, as we all know. And, Pay Act will cover some of this. And then in this budget, of course, there's also a 27th payroll. So all of these are pressures, but all of these pressures are met in this budget. And this just shows you the trend. And as I said, this is the second largest budget in the history of the agency at $680.8 million. This slide shows really just where the money comes from. I would draw your attention to the lower left-hand corner. The largest single bucket of incoming funds is from the Federal Highway Administration at just under $300 million. The second largest is the State Transportation Fund, the green portion on the far right side at $282 million. And then on the third side is the other federal agencies, Federal Transit, Federal Aviation, Federal Railroad, and NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration investments at $57 million. And this just shows the remaining locations of incoming funding, if you will. This slide shows the breakout of where we spend the money. We are proposing, there's a lot of moving parts here. I'll just draw your attention perhaps to the top 5 or 6, but the single largest portion of investment of this budget as recommended is state paving on the right at about 3 o'clock, I guess, if you would. This is at $120,500,000, which is just under 18% of the entire budget. On the opposite side of the pie chart, the second largest investment is in maintenance at $103.5 million. I would also point out town programs up at about 11 o'clock on the chart in that light brown. Town programs are the third largest total spending portion of this budget at $79.2 million. So you can, I won't name all of these, but you can see that's how broken out it is in all the areas that it obviously funds. The budget, as in all the decisions we make, is focused around growing the economy, clearly keeping our multimodal transportation system in good order. A budget of this size also supports thousands of jobs in the state of Vermont, and that's something that we must never forget. We have increased, and we'll speak further on in the presentation about town programs, but we have increased town highway structures and town highway class 2 programs by $14 million. And this fully restores the funding that was paused in the fiscal 21 budget. And we're very proud of that. Plus, as we mentioned last year, when we paused these 2 programs due to revenue issues, the towns that were in the queue remained in the queue they were in. So no one was bumped out of the rotation. This also has $36.4 million for rail. We'll go through rail further, but it continues the commitment to Amtrak service to Burlington and the work necessary across the state, but in particular, that remains on the Western Corridor. There's a total of $18.3 million for airports, which does include $7.8 million that comes directly to Burlington Airport from the FAA. But we wanted to show you at least the total aviation-related budget for the state of Vermont. And it's got $5.5 million in downtown transportation funds, as the governor mentioned yesterday in his budget address. This is a pretty significant program. It's $4 million out of the transportation fund, and the budget proposes $1.5 million from general fund to expand the vast array of designated programs in village centers. It also addresses vulnerable populations in Vermont, a very robust transit budget, including $3 million that went directly to Green Mountain Transit from the Federal Transit Administration. It maintains our commitment to Amtrak for fiscal 22 at $8.8 million. It directs $5.2 million to park and rides, and again, we'll speak further about them later in the presentation. $18 million for bicycle and pedestrian facilities across Vermont. And probably the most exciting thing is, well, there are many great projects, but one of the most exciting elements of coming out of this budget, and we hope construction season of 2021, will be the completion of, or near completion of, the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. And again, we'll talk about that. It focuses $5 million in our budget to continue electric vehicle incentives, converting more Vermonters to the use of electric vehicles and supporting those with a build out of infrastructure, and direct $6.1 million toward additional work to protect Lake Champlain waterways. Just a bit of an update on the federal funding component. The FAST Act currently now is set to expire, or has been extended rather. It was set to expire last September. Congress appeared to have seen a way to conclude that, and then that seemed to escape them. So they extended the current situation to September 30th of this calendar year. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the COVID Relief Act that was passed in December provided significant funds to Vermont, both in the surface transportation arena through federal highway and through federal transit in funding directly to transit providers. We will speak about the federal highway portion, and the programs will come in after this presentation today and delve more deeply into the projects that we've directed some of these funds to. The federal transit money is nearly a direct pass-through to the transit operators, and unlike the original money that came out of the CARES Act, which much of it went for PPE and things of that nature, this money they're able to use, if they wish, to provide for shortfalls in operations. The electric vehicle incentive program, as I mentioned, is $5 million, $2 million direct incentives to Vermonters to purchase EVs. A very interesting program called Replace Your Ride, which provides, as it's currently scripted, up to $3,000 per Vermonter, per family, if you will. These are for lower income families, many of whom might live in more rural areas and have to rely on driving to work, but may otherwise not be able to ever purchase an EV. So this, in addition to other state and federal programs, this particular program would allow them to either, I believe, purchase new or used, and they could be full EV or hybrid vehicles. So the idea is to get older, less, I should say, fuel efficient cars off the road and get people an opportunity, or help give them an opportunity to get into a car that not only is cheaper for them to operate, but requires less maintenance and is obviously better for the environment.
Mr. Secretary, I'm trying to connect. Is Replace Your Ride program what you've named the program that we funded in a prior T-bill to help these lower income families with vehicles that even will get much higher mileage and help reduce carbon emissions? This isn't a new program. This is continued funding for that program. I sometimes have a hard time keeping all the separate names of programs straight and if they're what I think they are.
No, that's a great question, Senator Kitchell, and I too sometimes have a problem keeping them all correct. I would ask Michelle if she could to jump in, but let me just say that this was a program that was pitched to us, if you will, just a few weeks ago. And my understanding is that my thought was that it was somewhat of a new program. But Michelle, is this basically just bolting on to an existing program?
So this is actually a new program, and it will stack this additional incentive of $3,000 on top of any other incentive a person might be eligible for. And the caveat with this program is that they have to turn in a vehicle that, they can't just pick any vehicle from the backyard. It has to be something that's registered and inspected, but that, has less of a value in terms of a person's ability to have affordable transportation from a gas mileage perspective, et cetera.
So as you remember, was it last year or 2 years ago when we were looking at how to make investments, and we were saying, particularly lower income, they're not going out. They're in the used car market. And we wanted to recognize that replacing an old clunker that gets 15 miles per gallon to something that, and I think we had a mileage standard, we would help. So does that program still exist?
Yeah, that's called the Mileage Smart program, and it's being run by Capstone.
Right.
So this would be, a person could use the Mileage Smart program and combine it with Replace Your Ride to get even more fiscal assistance to get them into a newer used electric vehicle. Or if it was a family that lived in the city and wanted to get a bus pass, a long-term bus pass, or an electric bicycle, there'd be other means of transportation. So we're going to come in and talk in detail about the program framework as we go forward.
One other component of this program, as Michelle was saying, is the vehicle that gets traded in has to be rendered unusable by the dealers. So if a person traded in, let's just say a 12-year-old car, that car is basically, the engine would be destroyed. The car would not be able to be resold or reused.
Geez,
And that's
that
one of
sounds
the,
like- Didn't we have that in the Mileage Smart program?
In the end, no,
No?
No.
But we talked about it then.
we did.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to reconstruct what's already in place and it's really hard. Why didn't we just expand our existing program? And I don't know, are you talking about a different form of administration?
It will probably be a somewhat different form of administration, but we will look to streamline administration. And there's a lot of nuances in terms of what this new program would offer for transportation choices. So what we're going to do is come in and recap all the programs, how they're doing so far, and what this new one would do in addition to the old ones.
While we're on this subject, what's it look like for the future of charging stations? Because if we keep incentivizing electric vehicles, but if we don't have charging stations, what good are they?
Well, I will add that the governor's budget proposes another $1 million for charging stations. We're continuing to deploy them. And, you know, we are basically supplementing the market at this point. We expect that as more electric vehicles come into the market, that private sector folks are going to start deploying charging stations because it will become equitable for them to do so.
Like
as we
charge point, you mean?
Yeah, charge point or fueling stations that are selling gas now may want to get into the electric market as we go forward.
Jane, where do we stand on, do we have a study coming back on how we're going to replace the gas tax with electric vehicles? Because we keep giving incentives, but when are
Yeah,
we-
I think we have several reports and a
Okay.
continuation. And boy, Andy's memory is probably better than mine on this.
Yeah, Andy would know. That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Senator
Relative to
Quigley,
the
you have-
public
or-
service, Riley.
have an answer?
We do not have a specific study on that. There was some discussion about it in committee, and I'm hoping that either Secretary Flynn or Michelle can talk to us about what their thinking is on that, either
So-
today or another time, because that was my understanding is that
We can have this at another time if you'd like, but it's just a thought that I have, and I keep having it because certainly we're trying to promote electric vehicles, but on the other hand, we got to address the issue about how do we collect some money. I know we had a brief discussion last year, and yeah, go ahead.
Senator Mazza, I'm pleased to let you know that we are going to be coming in and talking
Okay.
about an effort we have underway to potentially structure a pilot or even go straight to a program for
Okay, good.
that. And so we'll plan to get that on the schedule with
okay.
Liz.
Thank you. All right, go right ahead. Yep.
thank you. Great discussion around a very important topic. And then lastly, I would just point out that this does continue the electrification of the public transit fleet, and we'll speak further about that later in the presentation, specifically to public transit. This is a snapshot of the Department of Motor Vehicle portion of the agency budget for fiscal 22 at $36 million. Excuse me a minute while I cancel my phone. I don't know who that was. I'll kill my ringer. Sorry about that. This is a $1.6 million increase. It continues current service levels. It does allow for the fact that DMV is realizing some increased costs of mail processing and bank service charges. For example, we no longer charge for what charge companies charge us when people use credit cards, and that was a cost to us. So we've had that baked in now. And it also addresses $500,000 for IT operating customer service improvements. I know the commissioner and her team will be in as well. But for example, there are forms where Vermonters fill out and calculate on their own the taxes that they think are owed on a transaction. And then there are times where there are math errors, and that does slow down the process and frustrates people. So we're looking to modernize those forms where the calculator will be automatic. You just plug in the information. That's an example of some of the IT operations and customer service improvements we're looking to do in this budget at DMV. Finance and administration comes in at 16.2, pretty level actually, just a 1.5% increase. And this primarily realizes 4 employees were transferred to finance and administration from the maintenance division. So further on, you'll see this reflect in 4 people fewer on the maintenance slide when we get to that portion of it.
The reason for doing that is the job functions better align with the work in finance and management, or is it a workload pressure issue that's behind this transfer?
No, great question, Senator Kitchell. It's alignment. It's alignment. I should have pointed that out. So thank you for asking the question. These people primarily are in logistics, and finance and administration looks across the entire agency. So we, for example, these people might be doing work at a VTrans building in Bennington, or they might be helping to do work at a DMV building, in Montpelier. Even though BGS is the primary of most of our facilities, they cut across the entire agency, and they cut across, aviation and rail and VTrans. So we felt that finance and administration is really has casts a wide spell across the agency, and that they were better there than just to be housed within maintenance.
Well, the common complaint, obviously, staff gets moved and bureaucracy, the central, the administrative staff grows and the people doing the work shrink. So that's why I was asking the question. So
Yep. No, that's good.
It's not changing their job duties or the work that they do. It's who has oversight for that particular function of the agency.
Correct. It's not changing their work duties. In fact, when they come in, when Wayne Gamble and Brad McAvoy leads this team, but when they come in, they'll talk more deeply to this. But these are a very highly functioning group. It's a small group, but they move mountains when things need to be done. For example, up at 40th and Allen at District 5, we were asked, I think back during the summer, if we had some space we could make available for public safety to house their USAR team, Urban Search and Rescue team, which was currently at that time leasing commercial space in Milton. And this group, our logistics group, went in and basically marshaled, a light renovation of one of the original buildings that VTrans had at 40th and Allen, which was an old aviation hangar that belonged to the Army when it was an Army base, and made that space available. So it's a small group, but they get things done. And because they do things though that aren't just directed at the highway division, we thought moving them into finance and administration was just a better way to structure that. But it's still the same people doing the same work. A paving budget this year, as the governor said yesterday, largest paving budget ever for the Agency of Transportation, and the 9th year in a row that the budget is at or exceeds $100 million. We believe $100 million has to be the bright line, and certainly anything above that is great, but it really has to be the bright line if we want to try to maintain, some level of condition. It is a record level paving program. This program targets 43 construction projects that are estimated to pave 360 miles. And of note, of these projects, over 74 miles of these projects will address shoulder widening, which will improve safety and accessibility for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. The Interstate Bridge Program reflects a decrease, but as you know from years of these presentations, this is really due to the where projects are at a given time. So it reflects completions of projects. It does fund 21 total projects in various forms, 15 of which will go to construction. In this coming year, we also are looking forward to the completion of the massive bridge project in Rockingham on I-91. The State Bridge Program is $49.8 million. It too reflects a decrease, in part driven by the nearing completion of the Middlebury project. We always refer to it as the Middlebury Tunnel, but it also has 2 surface bridges at grade in the center of the village. So it is a state bridge project. 36 projects will be funded for construction this year. A total of 67 projects will have work elements completed or at least begun this year. Among them, 9 large culvert projects as well. The state roadway program is $37.3 million. Again, reflecting a slight decrease driven primarily by the near completion at this point or this coming season of the downtown Waterbury Main Street project. 71 total projects are funded in this appropriation. There will be construction on 26. And just of note, a few, the Burlington Champlain Parkway project, some work on the Burlington Rail Yard Enterprise project, Crescent Connector in Essex Junction, the ongoing work in Pittsford on Route 7, the completion, as I said, of the Waterbury Main Street project, excuse me, some intersection work in Williston at US 2 and Industrial Avenue, and various culvert and slope projects around the state. Traffic and safety program at $33.3 million. Again, just a slight decrease driven by the amount of projects that are ready. This budget funds projects that are ready to go. When there's a slight decrease, it just reflects the difference from year to year in the number of projects that are ready to go. It does address 40 projects in total, construction on 22 of them. It also houses the $5 million investment for what is referred to today as the Behavioral Safety Unit, which was or still is the Governor's Highway Safety Program. The terminology has changed basically from it's a national conversation about what that unit really does and its investments. But that is the money that, as you would have known before, was Governor's Highway Safety Program. It also addresses major projects around the state of note. Route 7 in Burlington near Locust Street and Shelburne Road by Christ the King Church, the roundabout. Colchester exit 16 is still on the books. That's the Costco exit conversation that is ongoing. Some work on Route 4 signage in Fairhaven to Rutland, Sykes Avenue in Hartford, some interesting work occurring down there, and some ongoing work on 116 in Heinsberg and various intersections, signs, markings, and the continuation of the Centerline Rumble Strip program. I think several years ago, we announced, probably 4, that we wanted to put rumble strips in 100% of the state roads where they were eligible. And that means that of all the state roads there are, about 80% of all those roads qualify or are eligible for centerline rumble strips. And eligible is determined by, it was a process and conversation, frankly, that involved the legislature some years ago when we first came out with centerline rumble strips, and there were some issues in areas where they were placed too close perhaps to residences or on corners where it was impossible to not cross the line. And at that point, there was a lot of work done to determine the metrics of exactly where these were best installed. And so that outcome has resulted in identifying about 80% of all state roads. And our mission is to complete all 80% of those state roads and continue to work toward that year to year to year. The park and ride facilities at $5.2 million is a slight decrease only because last year we had a pretty robust program. We did some work, some upgrades on several park and rides, and we will continue to do that this year. There'll be some major upgrades in Berlin, right there by Applebee's, the existing park and ride. And there will be an upgrade to the Williamstown Northfield Park and Ride. And this budget will begin construction of the new park and ride in Williston, just off exit 12. And altogether, the budget is directed at increasing 228 parking spaces across the state system.
That new one in Williston, that's where the state police barracks is going to be?
That's an adjoining piece of property, Senator Mazza. So the agency has its own piece of property. Public safety had purchased an adjoining piece of property. The public safety barrack conversation, I believe, is still ongoing, but we're moving ahead with construction of the park and ride on the piece that AOT owns.
Senator Mazza, may I ask a question?
Yes, go right ahead, Senator Chittenden.
So Secretary Flynn, I have to inject things that I mentioned on the campaign trail, just so I can stay true to my word. And one thing that Tim Ash was a fan of, and I'm wondering what your take is with these park and ride facilities. As I look to parking lots and how ugly they are and how they sort of break apart the bucolic scenery of Vermont, I always wonder why we can't try to implement more solar panels covering them, similar to what we have at the Echo Center with the cantilever structures. I know it increases the cost of the solar panels, but I think it'd be kind of kitschy if Vermont had all of our park and rides covered with solar panels capturing energy over and dual purposing our spaces while also shielding our cars from the weather, the inclement weather, including ice, snow, and excessive heat in the summertime. Is that a crazy notion, or is this something that's come up in your travels that you might look to place solar panels over the increased parking surfaces that we might be employing throughout the state?
Thanks for the question, Senator Chittenden. No, I don't think it's a crazy notion by any means. I personally have not come across that question as far as covering an entire park and ride, like it were a roof structure. I'm very familiar with, the lean-to type structures, like, for example, there's one at the Hunger Mountain Co-op, and they're all over the place. So I'm familiar with those. We obviously have, we have a degree of charging stations in our park and rides, and a lot of our lighting systems are operated today by photovoltaic. But I might ask Chief Engineer Simmons if he's ever heard of the notion of covering entire parking lots. Anything can be done. It's a matter of cost, obviously.
Senator Ash never brought it up in committee when he was on committee. You remember that, Jane, or Senator Perchlik?
I think Senator Chittenden was just talking about Ash's fondness for park and rides, not necessarily the solar.
Oh,
side.
okay.
There are some parking lots, I think at Smuggler's Notch, some other places where we do have entire parking lots covered with solar. It's not as common in Vermont as places in the south where you want to protect from the sun. But yeah, it could definitely be done, and there's actually some permitting incentives to do it that way. But there are many other issues.
We didn't we hear though that some of the ski areas, Andy, are in fact using this model?
Right. It does prevent you. You don't have to plow the snow underneath it. You do have some other issues to deal with.
Yeah.
No, very interesting.
Okay. All right.
The next portion of the budget is pedestrian, bike, and facilities, $16.8 million. Again, this funds construction on 31 projects. So the budget reflects the projects that are presented and ready to go. So it does have a small decrease. It will address over 50 miles of multi-use path. And it also, as I mentioned earlier, does speak to the completion of the 93-mile Lamoille Valley Rail Trail.
So this is the T fund because the state match was done through the capital bill. So this is the 9.6 in construction funding. Is that just the T fund, or is that the total?
That's the construction funding total that's remaining for the project, is my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
But Senator Mon,
Go ahead.
I had the same question, how this relates to the work that we did last year in the capital bill. And then we had that whole debate about capital bill or transportation bill for this trail. Does that money get backed out, or that money was already, that money plus this money is what is needed?
I thought that my question was that match money is part of the 9.6, which is a combo of the state funding from the capital bill, which was a 2-year, and part of the 9.6. Most of it is the federal dollars, but that's what that's what I was asking, if that was the gross amount that includes the match that was funded through the 2-year appropriation in the capital bill.
I may ask Lenny if he could weigh in on that question, Senator Kitchell. I know that 9.6 is what we have programmed for this year for Lamoille Valley, but as to the makeup of the funding, Lenny, can you address that, please?
Yes, good morning. The 9.6 million includes FHWA funding, and the match is coming from the capital bill money that was appropriated last year. So it's a combination of those two fund sources, and we anticipate it.
Yeah. Okay, that you've answered the question, and it was exactly what your secretary said, first cut, so that's good too.
Yeah, that's good too. Well done, Joe.
That's very good.
Can you remind Lenny or Secretary Flynn what that capital bill appropriation was? Like how much of the 9.6 million did we appropriate last year?
Ooh.
Ooh, boy, I want
Yeah.
to say it was around 2.9 million or there.
2.8, I believe, 2.8
Okay,
for the
yeah.
to cover the full cost, knowing it was over two, but the capital bill is a 2-year bill anyway. So I think that was the match, and the estimated total cost, I think, was 15 million.
Yes, somewhere
Gross.
around there. Yeah.
The trail is going to end up right at Senator Kitchell's house, and then she can sell the hot dogs or hamburgers or whatever.
Well,
Uh,
that part of the trail is already completed, Senator Mazza.
Okay.
So I think the major beneficiary might be Marty's store.
Oh, boy. All right.
Isn't the other end heading over to Senator Westman's neck of the woods?
Oh, absolutely, through Cambridge and all right through Lamoille County, starting with
Oh, boy.
the Hardwick Town line.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
And you can see that this portion of the budget continues the support to local motion. And the other projects are sprinkled across the state, as you can see, from Bennington to Central Vermont to Colchester to Fairfield, the Lamoille Valley, as we just mentioned, Milton, and some work in Richford on the Missisquoi Trail as well. Transportation Alternatives Program at $4.5 million is a slight increase. This does fund all projects that received grants previously, which are construction on 21 projects and a total of 42 that are funded in some fashion. These are primarily bike.
Okay, that's what it's like. Could you give us some examples of what falls in this bucket?
Sure, these are primarily bike and ped improvements that otherwise don't fall in the bike and ped program. There's some environmental mitigation projects. There's some historic preservation. I think some of the numbers I got just yesterday, there are 7 environmental projects in here. There are 9 bike and ped projects, and there's actually a municipal salt shed. So this is sort of a catch-all area where we include a lot of these other types of work. Program development, pretty straightforward, just a 2.9% increase. This is really the administration of a lot of the work that is done on the whole highway side of the house, if you will. Rest areas for this year at $1.5 million, $450,000 increase, and this is really due mostly to resurfacing of the parking lots at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Rest Area on 89 northbound in Sharon. There's no other major construction projects, and again, we fund capital projects only. BGS currently, the way this is constructed, funds all the operating budgets for Vermont Park and Rides.
Park and Rides must have took a hit this year with less people traveling, I'm sure. It's just.
They did, Senator. Yes, in fact, there's some statistics we can get. I don't have them at my tip this morning, but
I see the one in Colchester. You see very few people at that one.
Yeah,
a new one. Boy, there's very few people there.
There are. It's come back.
Here, they plug in their car and get electricity or whatever.
Yeah, we do have a problem with that in some of we have a problem with that in some of our park and rides as well. I think we might have mentioned that when we did the agency overview a couple of weeks ago, but we do have people that just park and sometimes even camp and plug in to the electrical drops. But that's completely different than the park and rides. That's more of an issue. I'm sorry, that's completely different than the rest areas. The other issue is predominantly at park and rides.
Yeah.
Policy and planning, $11.5 million budget, almost completely level to last year. The slight decrease just reflects a one-time grant to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission that was in the 21 budget. The maintenance budget for the agency this year is at 103.5, which is a $3.7 million increase, which reflects additional bridge maintenance and activities that we were able to put in from COVID relief FHWA funds. Also, maintenance carries a pretty significant retirement cost. Just first of all, maintenance For the newer senators and members of the committee, the maintenance area at VTrans is just a little over 500 people. So you can imagine, you know, the ebb and the flow of our workforce, the fairly significant number of long-term employees. So retirement impacts weigh pretty significantly in this area. And the general budget, of course, continues the focus on maintenance, safety, preservation, resilience, back to basics, mowing and guardrails, and then all the other things that we do day in and day out, litter, everything.
I realize this sounds a little technical, but back to basics, I would suggest that maintenance was doing something other than, or that was competing with those
Right.
basic functions.
No, that's a great observation. I think maybe a better way to put it would be increasing the basic work we do. You know, back to basics, we do contract for we contract for a lot of the long run interstate mowing, the miles and miles of median. We obviously contract for the vast majority of guardrail work because we just don't have the forces to do 30,000 feet of guardrail, if you will, in a spring perhaps. But, you know, we want the crews to be out there working it every day. An example of that is certainly if you around the interstate system, the garages last summer started mowing the interchanges themselves a lot more frequently, instead of just once or twice a season that the contract mower might have come in, for a lot of reasons. Number one, it looked a lot better. Number two, I believe it's a safety issue, especially with on-ramps where they merge and you want to be able to see what's coming from the other side across the grass. And so it is a lot of basic work. And again, I know that Ann Gamble is on, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but either if she or Wayne Simmons wanted to speak a moment more to perhaps the scope of the basics, to Senator Kitchell's point.
Maybe it's just a term. I know that we've tried to do, and maybe it's sort of reflecting back on the work that we're doing so that we wash our bridges so they don't rust as quickly, so that we are doing certain maintenance on pavement to prevent further deterioration. So maybe it's just a matter of that focus on those activities that really serve to prolong the life of the infrastructure.
So yes, if I may, my name is Wayne Simmons, for the record, Chief Engineer of the Highway Division. And I think it's probably time that we lose the back to basics as a slogan. This was really something that we did about 4 years ago because we were recognizing that we were getting, to Secretary Flynn's point, drawn into some larger construction projects and maintenance and things like bridge washing, street sweeping, ditching, mowing, all those things that really do add up over time being deferred. We're actually being deferred. So it really is just continuing to fund those basic maintenance and put our resources there. So it probably is time that we lose the back to part of it and just say we're funding the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was a good point to bring up, Senator Kitchell. Thank you. Whoops, excuse me. The next slide is public transit. As I mentioned in the opening, a pretty significant investment in public transit, a $4.6 million increase. This also does include a direct Federal Transit Administration pass-through to Green Mountain. The increase that you see is predominantly a capital increase for buses. There is a $16.5 million spend for a total of 95 buses across Vermont, 7 of which are programmed to be fully electric. And these are going across all the providers in the state of Vermont. So this is a pretty significant opportunity to upgrade the capital fleet for Vermont's transit providers.
Last question on
Yes.
that? My recollection was that we had some electric buses out there operating, and we were going to be waiting to see kind of how those pilot projects went before we purchased new buses. Is that still the plan, or is because of this federal money we're kind of
No, great
accelerating
question.
our ideas, or are the new purchases going to be informed by those what we learned in the pilots.
I think the last point you made, Senator Perchlik, the purchases will be informed. The study of the pilots are still ongoing, but the intention certainly is that they prove functional and beneficial. So we wanted to earmark the 3.8 million for the purchase of 7 more. Certainly if something were to arise in the meantime that said that that was not the best way to go, that can be readjusted. But these also take quite a long time to procure. So it's not like there are 7 electric buses that we're going to go buy, in July, because they take a while to get. But the plan is to continue to increase the fleet of electric transit vehicles. But in the meantime, we've still got a lot of ground to cover and a lot of data to gather from the vehicles that are out there. But we fully expect that will show, favorable outcomes. And Michelle, I don't know if you have any more that you might want to add to that question.
Secretary Flynn, really, you covered it. And I would note that we're targeting the smaller buses, van style buses for this next purchase. The procurement, as the secretary said, is very lengthy. And so, I think the vehicles are evolving as we are moving forward. And we are also wanting to make sure that we are working with a variety of transit operators across the state to have them adopt this technology. And the purchase price also includes the training and, the fit up they need on their maintenance and operations side to, make sure we have chargers for them and that their mechanics know how to fix these buses. So it's a slow build.
Okay, great. Yeah, 'cause even though I'm all for moving as quickly as fast to electrify the fleet, especially with these new buses, I don't want to, take 2 steps forward, just to take a step back, because, something that we learned specifically around wintertime use and how we're heating the cabs and things like that. So hopefully just those lessons learned will be quick enough that we can still get these new buses, but not make any mistakes twice.
Senator Bowser.
Yes. Yes.
Are you done, Senator Perchlik?
Yeah.
My apologies. I was trying to get in before the conversation moved along too fast. Secretary Flynn, on the previous slide regarding maintenance, you mentioned there are 500 employees performing essential road safety tasks, plowing, mowing, tending to bridges. My question somewhat connects to the following slide, which is in my days on the Green Mountain Transit Board, which I always think fondly of, I remember at different times people highlighting the wage disparity of what we were paying our drivers to what was being offered by state positions. This past Friday, other concerns were raised about the competitiveness of our VTrans offerings. And I also see initiatives out of Washington, D.C. to get to a federal minimum wage of $15, as well as pushes in the state of Vermont. How much is VTrans currently considering a labor wage analysis for how this looks for the next 1 to 3 to 5 years, as the impacts might be on possibly having to upgrade or increase not just our benefits, but our hourly wage in order to stay competitive and attracting talent to stay within VTrans?
Well, Senator Chittenden, that's a great question. I think the last portion of it I'd address first. I mean, we do need to maintain competitiveness to get all the talent we need. And quite frankly, that's been a struggle at this point. So to answer the whole question, we have not done an analysis on what a federal wage increase would be just since it's been discussed. But I can tell you right now that we do feel pressure because in most cases, towns pay more money to start in a highway garage than VTrans might pay an entry-level person to start in a highway garage. And often what happens is somebody will start at VTrans because we have an excellent training program. We will pay to get their CDLs, and then often they move on. And that's a real issue. And, and something that maintenance, frankly, has dealt with for years. It does require competitive wages, but that's a difficult needle to move, especially among a group of that size. And you'd also have to move it across the entire workforce. I don't think we could just single out VTrans maintenance workers. So you raise a great point. It's certainly something that we have to manage to every year. It is not uncommon in the spring to see 30, 40, 50 vacancies among the 500 plus maintenance workers, often in part because these people are on call from November 1st to April 1st. 24 hours a day. They have to be able to respond within 30 minutes. They have to be able to respond as well, which means you can't take vacation. You can't go to a Christmas party and consume or anything like that, because you have to be able to drive. And it's a long haul. And so there's a natural attrition in the spring, but there's also attrition that is directly attributable to higher wages paid by most towns, frankly, or at least by many towns, certainly in northwestern Vermont. The competition is very, very keen for talented and experienced highway personnel.
I suspect it's a regional aspect to this, as you point out. Because these are classified employees, there is a provision to do labor market adjustments on salaries if state salaries are out of whack with the larger labor market. So that there are adjustments that can be requested. What we normally hear is complaints from the towns that the state is taking advantage of their training investments, and the positions they hire end up working for the state. And we hear that a lot from particularly in law enforcement. It's one area where there's seems to be an upward from the local level to the state level. So I guess some of this experience about who's paying more may depend on also the nature of the job, because for some areas, the sheriffs, for example, are currently complaining about the investment and the time funding training only to have people move into, for example, the state police. So, but there is a provision to do salary adjustments relative to the labor market, recognizing that most employees are in fact in a classified system and represented by VSEA.
Well, all good points.
And I do agree with Senator Kitchell. It's a regional problem. As we discussed last week, the towns, at least in the area that I represent, most of them don't offer the complete package of benefits. They might offer a whole hourly wage. But being that the state puts so much into these town budgets to keep these roads going, to get better qualified people at that town level, I think it's almost a win sometimes to have the state working with qualified people that are better trained. I don't think it's all a loss at the end of the day.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, and we partner well with towns, and I don't mean to imply that there's a divide simply because there might be wage disparity in certain parts of the state. That aside, through our training center and through the municipal roads program, we train road foremen and women and road crews, and I think I mentioned this in our overview of the agency a couple of weeks ago. We work to help them as they look to design local projects. So, I mean, there's a great working relationship, and there is an ebb and a flow. There's no question. I think if you look perhaps into some of the more rural pockets of Vermont, even a state highway job that might pay $1 or $2 an hour less might be very attractive because of the benefits, as you mentioned. There again, we do see certainly in the Chittenden County area and District 5, District 8 predominantly, where there are higher paying town jobs, and often the case, these are younger employees, and like we all might have once thought, benefits or retirement savings is fine, but right now I need to make more money each week, and I think that aspect of this influences some of the decisions as well for some of our workforce when they look to move on. But it is a conversation, certainly. You're correct, Senator Kitchell, among police agencies, who pays to train whom, and then where do they go because they can make more money. So it's not just certainly V-Trans maintenance.
Is the benefit package generally to all state employees the same, or is it different for different groups, or how's that determined?
My knowledge, it's generally the same. Excluding exempts, of course, but for classified state employees, it's generally the same. I think you have to carve out, perhaps, I know, the state police union and perhaps Department of Corrections, but I honestly don't know for sure. Those are just assumptions on my part.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Moving on to aviation, the aviation budget this year is an increase of $895,000. This budget does also include the $500,000 cap support to Burlington International that they use to increase their match ability to draw down more money from FAA. And this budget, again, also this year includes $1 million for a project at the Highgate Airport. This project is a municipal sewer water line project that the town of Highgate has launched already. Currently, the sewer water line terminates at the road that goes to Missisquoi Valley Union High School. And this plan, the municipal extension, would take it from the road to Missisquoi Valley Union High School to Airport Road. So it'll go east on 78 to Airport Road, and then go down Airport Road, past the VTrans garage facility that's there, all the way down toward the terminal and our snow removal equipment building. This also would pay to attach or hook up our VTrans garage to water sewer and the state facilities that are down at the end of the Airport Road. We believe that this is a good investment because having water and sewer along the Airport Road only increases the potential for growth, expansion, and economic opportunity on the state property at the Franklin County Airport. So this is in our budget to support. The project itself in total is estimated at $3.5 million, and the town of Highgate is basically building a package to fund that. That involves Northern Border grants, which they've already received. They will be seeking Vermont Community Development Program money, as well as a USDA loan. And so these other aspects have to be voted on by the town. So this budgeted amount of money, of course, assumes that the entire project goes forward, which we won't know until the town decides its course of action on the total cost.
Senator Mazza.
Yes, Senator Purcell.
I'm very excited. Sorry, that was.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm very excited about this project, Secretary Flynn. I think it's exactly the type of project Vermont needs more of. I have received a correspondence about it, and it talked about a commercial development that would also be aligned with this. Have we, and I apologize for being the new guy around here, I'm going to play that card for another month or two. Have we ever used a transportation TIF before, a transportation tax increment financing solution for solutions like this at the municipal level where you understand TIF, so I won't go any further than that. But is that a notion that I heard Governor Scott propose in his remarks yesterday?
He was proposing TIFs in general. I'm not personally familiar, at least since I've been secretary, that that's involved a transportation project that was within our budget. It may have at the local level, at the municipal level. I don't know if there's anyone else that has been here longer than I that may have some experience with that, but this is intended, Senator Chittenden, to be a direct spend on this particular project, to enhance, frankly, not only the current function of our facilities on our property, but to enhance future expansion for economic reasons.
Senator Purcell.
But and is the $1 million that's coming out of the aviation funds just for the extension of the sewer line to the state property, or is it just a part of that total 3-point-something million for the total sewage expansion?
It's a part of the 3.5 million, Senator Perchlik, but the $1 million investment would include the cost to connect the VTrans, the current VTrans garage facility that's on Airport Road, and it would include the connection cost to like at the terminal and the snow removal building, which are our buildings at the airport site itself.
Do you know how much those
about, yes, that's expected to be about $225,000.
Okay, thanks.
So the whole $1 million is reflected in our budget.
Okay.
The next slide speaks to the rail program, which has an increase of just under $5 million. This is predominantly driven by increased discretionary FRA money for various crossing projects. As I said earlier, it bakes in the continuance of Amtrak for fiscal '22. It does recognize investments that remain along the western corridor to bring the Ethan Allen into Burlington. I mentioned, I think last time we spoke, that there's work ongoing within the Burlington Rail Yard right now. And there's also some work crossing on the crossings at King Street and Maple Street that have to accommodate the way the trains move in and out of the rail yard with an Amtrak train sitting there overnight. So this is all baked into that. And it continues the project that's funded by the Build Grant that is replacing, or I'm sorry, rehabilitating, if you will, all the bridges along the western corridor from Rutland south to Bennington and west to Hoosick, New York. That is a grant that we received, I believe, 2 years ago, maybe one, but I think it was 2. And that work is ongoing, and that's in this budget as well. Whoops, transportation buildings, $850,000. This increase really just refires a project in Lunenburg that we put on the shelf in fiscal 21. We need to replace that facility, and this will begin to do that. It will not be complete as a result of the fiscal 22 budget. And this budget also typically is used across Vermont at our facilities for things such as replacing heating systems, or where we do make liquid salt, that equipment, or standby generators, basic capital needs that occur when you own buildings. And so that's, and going back to the conversation we had earlier about the logistics group that moved from maintenance to finance and administration, this is some of the type of work that group does, but they not only do it for VTrans, they do it across the whole agency. Just give an example. Town Highway Bridge, just under $15 million this year. It's a $1.8 million increase, and it's driven by several large projects. The Brattleboro Hinsdale, New Hampshire Bridge project should begin in fiscal 22. This is a project that is led by the state of New Hampshire, and we are partnering with them. That's basically because the majority of the Connecticut River is in the state of New Hampshire, according to the boundary lines. This will come into Brattleboro just south of the Amtrak station, or Whetstone Brewery, if anybody's familiar with downtown Brattleboro. Very involved project. There's a rail yard, there's a fuel depot, a lot of right-of-way issues that have been dealt with, but the project is scheduled to begin in this coming season in this budget, and that's very exciting. And then there are obviously bridge projects in Enosburg, Newbury, Newfane. This will fund 31 projects altogether, and 14 of which will be in a construction phase. In town highway programs, I think we're very proud to say that we're investing nearly $80 million, 79.2 in town highway programs. Of that $79.2 million, it reflects a $21.9 million increase. Increases in town highway bridge, town highway structures in class 2, as I said in the opening. That $14 million completely restores the funding for town highway structures and town highway class 2. Total here for town highway programs, again, we just wanted to show the breakout. 14.9 million for town highway bridges, 12.7 for town highway structure grants, 15.3 for town highway class 2, 1.15 for town highway non-federal disasters. There's money in there for town highway federal disasters, 27 million for the town highway aid formula. That's where every town gets something without the match. The other two, town highway structures and town highway class 2, of course, it does require a local match. Local roads, municipal mitigation assistance, and public assistance to towns for FEMA. So very robust at just under $80 million for entire town highway investments. Yes.
Yes, Grant.
On the town highway aid, I know in the past we've always notwithstanding the increase that's in the legislation. Does this continue to not increase it, or does this follow the old statute and actually provide the additional funding?
This is, I believe we've increased it, but I would actually have to ask for clarification from Lenny.
The formula in statute is written such that it does not require an increase over the prior year. So it is in fact level funded, but it also adheres to the statutory requirements.
Okay.
So am I
Well,
thinking of a different program that maybe Senator Kitchell or Mazza can remind me? There was a town program.
Yeah, what we were concerned about is if we did some additional supplemental funding, because we had that would become the new base and an ongoing obligation. And so I think the question is, are you looking at any of this money as sort of a add-on because of the federal dollars coming in that allows us to increase money to the towns, but not create an expectation that the T fund would be able to sustain that level of funding support out into the future?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. No, this really allows us to reestablish what we paused. So I don't believe, to your question, Senator Kitchell, that it increases an expectation we can't meet in the future. It's just, it's getting us back to where we were. Last year, we paused both town highway structures and town highway class 2, but we did make a one-time increased investment in town highway aid. And we made it clear that that was not to be expected to be the new normal, to your last point. That was a
Okay.
one-time, so.
That, I think that was what we were asking is to tie it back to that earlier conversation. One other factor here in terms of town highway programs is if they have adopted the road standards that have been put forward to make our roads more resilient to weather events and to do ditching and so forth in ways that are protect the roadbed. So my question is, how many towns now have adopted those standards and are eligible for that higher match?
I Wayne, do you know the answer, Wayne Simmons? I think I
You
do,
know,
but I don't want to guess.
I'm sorry, I don't know that. We actually were just asking that same question internally a few weeks ago, and I think we've tracked down where in this is being tracked at DEC, but we haven't pulled those out. But this will be a good reason for us to pull that back up and get back to you on that.
I know it's quite a significant percentage, but I just wondered where it stood as of now.
I think we're going to find that it's that it's well above 80%, if not into 90s now. But I'll get back to the committee this week on an answer with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you. I thought I had heard 80, but that really would not be a certain answer, certainty. So we will confirm that. And the last slide of our budget is the Transportation Board. Very modest increase, 1 employee, and we don't direct their operations, but we do fund their operations. So that wraps up at least the prepared PowerPoint portion of the testimony this morning.
Okay, any questions this time? I'm sure we'll have some in the future, but is there anything, there's a lot to cover this morning in those in that budget, but looks like a well laid out budget. And any questions at this time? Yes, Senator Perchlik.
One of your slides had a bullet point that you didn't go over about EV rate design, but I assume we'll hear about that in the future from somebody else. I think it was on your slide about the electric vehicle incentives.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Missed that. But yes, I know there'll be more testimony, Senator Perchlik, on the entire EV portion of the package, and including rate design, infrastructure build out for charging, to Senator Mazzo's point earlier, and probably some sort of I would hope perhaps a preliminary review of what we're seeing already on the electric bus pilots.
Okay. And another question, which maybe it's fine to tell me that this is an appropriate time or venue. The issue that it's not related to the budget. So it's the issue with the the contractor that we had on the bridges on the I-91.
Mhm.
The
Yeah, no, that's-
rebar. I didn't. Last we heard, there was going to, you were working with the Attorney General and things like that. I didn't know if there was an update on that.
No, that's an excellent question. And I do have an update. I don't want to seem overly legal here, but we did ask the attorneys what we could say if we were asked, because we felt that it was appropriate to say something, and we also expected to be asked. So if you don't mind, I'll read what we were really allowed to say. And this was dated January 13th. So following diagnostic testing on all suspected bridges, AOT continues to work on assessing the appropriate repairs. J.A. McDonald, the contractor, to your point, Senator Perchlik in question, remains suspended from the state of Vermont's pre-qualification list from bidding on any federally funded projects after Federal Highway Administration served the company with a notice of intent to disbar. The state of Vermont is also working with federal stakeholders, and this process does take time. And there has been, I believe it's fair to say, some COVID impacts, not on our end per se, but there's a lot of back and forth with Federal Highway in Washington, and just everything in general has caused this to take this long. I also can tell you that there are currently active discussions with the company through legal channels, and that's really all I can say. I would also say, for the record, those bridges are open because we do not deem them as unsafe. For the newer members of the committee, this is a situation where a contractor really did not follow the plans and took some actions that were not part of the plans, and it was discovered, and it does not affect safety. It really is more of a matter of the longevity of the structure. When a structure is designed and constructed, it's done so with an expected lifespan, and anything that materially deviates from the design of how it's built could affect that lifespan. So, and I don't know if Chief Engineer Simmons feels there's anything more that needs to be said about the bridge condition, but I would just go back to Senator Perchlik and say that I think we're probably not very far off from, the negotiating what the outcome looks like.
Okay. And does the federal disbarment mean there would also be a state disbarment for many contracts, even if there wasn't federal money, which was probably pretty rare to have a project without federal money in it?
Well, that would ultimately be a decision the agency would have to make, and the contractor could appeal that to the Transportation Board. But currently, they're under suspension, and there's a big difference, because while they're not able to currently operate on any project that has any federal money, whether that's a wastewater project or a highway project, they cannot participate in a project with federal money as a prime contractor. It is not disbarment. It's perhaps not a place somebody wants to be, but it isn't disbarment at this point. And that decision, what Federal Highway has indicated is that decisions it makes will follow whatever outcome the state of Vermont and the Vermont Attorney General's office, arrives at with the contractor. So there's still another round of decision-making at the Federal Highway Administration level.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Yeah,
Joe,
no, great.
the interstate bridges, I know they're very costly to fix. What percentage would you say have been reconditioned versus how many are left to do? Is that because I know they're 60, 70 years old, but I know we made a lot of progress, but they're very expensive every time we do one. Are we ahead of the curve on that, or we got more than we've done, or less?
Well, I think we have many more to go, but as far as a percentage, Senator Mazza, I might offer this question to Chief Engineer Simmons. He's
Okay. Just curious if we're making progress. I know they're very expensive, the Brattleboro and all of they're very expensive bridges. And I just wonder how many we got.
So we've made huge progress on the interstate bridges. And if you recall some of the numbers we showed, I think we're at right around 1% poor condition on the interstate, which is, I'm not sure it's the best in the country, but it's right there in the country with the condition of our bridges. We have done a lot of the big ones. We've done a lot of the the ones that have cost us a lot of money in the last 10 years.
I guess so.
I think the real challenge on the interstate for probably the next 10 years are going to be the culverts. We really have maybe a few more bridges that need to either be rehabbed or replaced, but it's really the large culverts that are under 20 to 50 feet of fill. And like the Georgia culvert that we had an issue with last fall following the Halloween storm. So that's going to be our challenge. And certainly those are not very cheap when you have to dig that deep to replace something. And as you know, a lot of our 8 and 10 foot culverts are becoming 20-foot bridges or larger now because of the frequency and intensity of the storms that we're seeing.
Okay, good. Any other questions at this time? Would the committee like to take a little break?
Sure.
Sure, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll continue. Okay,
What-
thank you very much.
10:30? 10:30?
10:30, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good job, AOT. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. For clarification, do you want us back, Senator Mazza, at 10:30 or for more?
I don't know whoever
questions?
Liz got on the agenda, who she,
Okay.
yeah.
It's
fine.
up to you, Secretary. We have scheduled Highway Division budget next.
So as far as the presentation this morning, we'll, as we move on into the,
Okay,
where we'll have you back on different issues, okay?
So
okay.
next
All
up
right.
would be Highway Division with Wayne Simmons and Ann Kamel. Does that sound okay?
Sure, sounds okay to me.
So
Okay,
everyone else can, okay. Thank you. If
Thank
that's
you.
clarifying.
Thank you.
So how are we doing? Just about ready to go?
I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay, I think we can set up. It's 10:30. Let's go for it. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
There's that. Can you guys see that right now?
I can see you.
Oh, you don't? Okay, let me just go back. How about now?
Not yet. Okay.
Let me get in presentation mode. Takes a little longer this way, doesn't it?
That's all right. No problem.
Seems to be an extra click each time.
All right. Tell us who you are and what you're going to
Good
do.
morning. My name's Kristen Higgins. I'm the Structures Program Manager. I'm happy to be here again this year. Kind of miss sitting around the table with you all, but
I know. We're learning a whole new world here.
in a lot of ways it's good because we can participate in many more of these. Joining me this morning will be Pam Thurber. She's our Bridge Management and Inspection Manager.
Okay.
Outline of our presentation, Pam's going to kick it off and she's going to talk about the different, 3 different programs and structures and the funding splits for those because they're slightly different. And then she's going to break it down into funding source distribution because, you know, the state funds even have their special areas that they come from. And then she's going to go over our structure asset population and then the asset condition, because that's what she specializes in. And then Pam will turn it over to me and I will go through the specifics of the state fiscal year 22 budget. And I'll start with the interstate bridge program, and then I'll segue into the state highway bridge program, and then finish up with the town highway bridge program. And then I'll do a brief update on the accelerated bridge program and talk about a couple of our projects that we did as an emergency response to the Halloween storm. And then I've found this to be an all-time favorite now. I don't leave these out, but the before and after pictures of the projects I presented on last year.
Okay.
So with that, Pam, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, good morning. My name is Pam Thurber, and I'm the Bridge Management and Inspection Program Manager for the state. I'll just go over real quick the funding that we use for the bridge programs. We have 3 programs: Interstate Bridge, State Highway Bridge, and Town Highway Bridge. And the funding splits for those are a little bit different. For Interstate Bridge, it's a shared funding with 90% coming from federal dollars and 10% state. Within State Highway Bridge, that funding split goes to be 80 federal and 20 state. And Town Highway Bridge, it's a shared funding of 80% federal dollars, 10% state, and 10% local. Now I put little pluses and minuses beside the state and local, primarily because that can change. If a bridge is a full replacement, it's an 80-10-10. If it's a rehabilitation of the bridge, it becomes an 80-15 share for the state. So the state share is increased a little bit. And then if we go for Act 153, and that's that act that allows us to reduce the local share if the road is closed and no temporary bridge is put in, that further reduces the local share by 50%. So if it was a rehab and Act 153 was inputted, the town share would be 2.5%. Okay, and this is just for this particular year, fiscal year 22, a pie chart of how that distribution is. So again, 90% on the interstate program comes from federal dollars. And then you see the rest of it is state dollars split between T-Fund and then TIB and TIB bond funds. For the State Highway Bridge, same thing is true here. The one thing I will note is that you'll notice that the federal share is 76%. That is less than the 80%, and normally we would expect more, but because we used a tapered share in fiscal year 21, we are now having to pay it back with state dollars in fiscal year 22. So that reduction to 76% reflects that. And then in town highway, the same thing, with the local share being the 4%, federal share 8%.
Pam, could I just go back to your earlier comment? For the new members of the committee, the reason that match dropped is because we advanced and used a higher rate of match for this year because of the lost revenues, knowing that it would have an impact in the FY22 budget. So the reason, which it seems to be unique to the federal funds, that allows you to alter that match, but then make it up in subsequent years. So that's what we did, use a higher rate of federal match, knowing that it would have to be reflected in the next year's fiscal budget.
Correct.
So I just wanted to
Thank you.
put that match reduction in the context of a budget decision that we made last year relative to fiscal year 21.
And Senator Kitchell, to pay back the difference in that match, and when we get new monies from Washington, are we allowed to use those funds to pay back what we borrowed earlier, or is it still state funds?
I think it would. I don't know the answer to that. I suspect it's state funds because normally they don't like using federal to match federal. We did have the one exception to that was with the corona relief funding that we are allowed to use as the match for FEMA, which is 75% FEMA, 25% federal CRF money. But that, to my knowledge, is unique. I don't know whether the new funding carries that same provision or not, Senator Ingalls, but it's very unusual that they permit you to use federal dollars to match federal dollars.
Okay.
And then on Town Highway Bridge, the same sort of pie chart showing again the local funds do come into play here, with 4% coming from the locals and a little bit of an increase for 81% on from federal dollars. And some of that is because we do, where the opportunities exist, we will look to get innovation grants, any of those discretionary programs that we can look for to have a higher federal share, we do look to use those. And this is just a quick overview of our inventory of bridges. For a small state, there are a lot of bridges. In the interstate bridge, there's 314 bridges, and then you see the breakdown below that of those that have a component. And a component is the deck, the superstructure, substructure, or culvert, if it happens to be culvert, in poor condition, fair condition, or good condition. So on the interstate program, there's 6 bridges that are in poor condition. Of those 6, I'm happy to report that all of them are a program project, so they will be taken care of in the next few years. State Highway Bridge, there's 810 bridges overall, 32 have a worst component poor, and then 395 have worst component that's actually in good condition. So Town Highway Bridge is just over 1,600 bridges for a total of about 20, just shy of 2,800 bridges. The same breakdown is true for the short structures. There's 204 on the interstate and just over 1,000 on the state highway system. We don't inspect or have an inventory of town short structures or those owned by another source. So this changed a little bit. Our definition of structurally deficient, Federal Highway, that's one of their terms, and they changed that a few years back to reflect that good, fair, poor condition. Structurally deficient essentially is that poor condition. So if something is rated by our inspectors 4 or less for any one of those components, it's classified as poor. If the lowest rating is 5 or 6, it's fair. Anything above that, bridge is deemed in good condition. And this is just a kind of a trend to show you that over the years, the past 10 years, we've made significant improvements in our system. So we've gone from an interstate having a high of 6.7% structurally deficient to right now we're at 1.59% structurally deficient. And the same is true for state highway, town highway, and those shorts. We're trending downward, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have things to do. So on these next 2 slides, just really quickly, just showing you how many we have in poor, fair, and good condition. It's those in that fair condition that we want to make sure that we're not ignoring and that we still do the maintenance activities, because they can slip into poor if we're not on top of things. Okay. And this slide is just the short structures. You'll see that one difference is that there's no town highways. So it's only those 2 bars for interstate and state highway. And I threw this slide in here just so you can see how we're doing as compared to the national trend and our tri-state partner trends. So Vermont is in that blue, and we've made significant progress reducing the number of structurally deficient bridges in the past few years, as compared to on the national trend, which is the brownish line, and our tri-state partners of the yellow line.
Thank you, Pam. It's a great overview. So now I'm going to get into the specifics of the fiscal year 22 program. Overall, it's just over $87 million for bridges. So that funds 119 projects, with 65 of those heading into construction. The spending has actually decreased from last year, and many of you know that's because the Middlebury project has spent a good fair of its budget, and now we're getting out of that high expense. This is our program funding trends from left to right this year, showing, over the years what type of budgets we've had. And you can see, over 5 years ago, we were up over $140 million. So we were getting some extra funding from the US government. And so we were able to take care of a lot of the deficiencies that Pam spoke of during that time. Very helpful. And now, we're leveling out. We were just over 100 million last year, but again, some of the big projects that we're drawing out of the state highway program brought us over the 100 million mark, and now we're down. But you can see we tend to hang out around the $100 million budget line. So the Interstate Bridge Program is going to fund $22.6 million this year. It's 21 projects total, with 15 of those heading for construction this summer. We continue to advance the design build project in Rockingham, which I've reported on over the past 3 years, and that is a project that's also winding down. I think next year I'll just be showing you the before and after pictures. But just to speak to the preservation, we are including many more preservation and maintenance projects to keep our trends going in the right direction and keeping our bridges in good condition. So we have 4 of those programmed, and there's bound to be more coming. It's down slightly, honestly, from last year. The Rockingham design build is spending $1.7 million this year and should be complete by fall. The program is funding 4 bridge deck replacements on I-89. That's a continuation from last year's projects. This year we will focus on the southbound lane at the interchange of exit 7. So a great need for that area. We're starting a pretty big project this year down in Sharon on I-89. It's a bridge deck rehabilitation, which means We're not taking the entire deck off. We're just going to take care of the problem areas, fix up the curb rail sorry, not the curb rail, just fix up the deck and some of the structural components underneath. But it's quite an undertaking, but it's a need in that area as well. Lebanon Hartford, I reported on last year, was coming. Well, yeah, it's in progress now. So that area down by West Lebanon, that exit 20, is going to be tricky to maneuver for the next couple of years. But again, that bridge is in great need of repair, and it's going to be a lot wider and easier to maneuver for those folks accessing New Hampshire in that location. And then finally, we have another very large project on Interstate 91 down in Weathersfield, and that's going to be a full deck replacement on some fairly large structures. They're up pretty high, have some pier work, and that's going to start this summer, and it will continue into next year. I think you received an update on the Rockingham project from either Wayne or the secretary, but here's an update on our big spender here.
Wow.
$51 million. This isn't the most spectacular pictures I've shown in the past. I think the one last year really showed how high up this is and how it had to be accessed from below to make these repairs. But
That's some bridge. Wow.
yeah, it's been quite a project, really interesting, and you know, one that we're really proud of. And I didn't put this in the presentation, but we just got an award for it. So there was a article written. So we always like that kind of stuff.
Who was the contractor on that? Out of state?
Yes, I believe it was Reed and Reed.
Okay.
Yep. So you know, below is what's left. It's basically just the buttoning up of the pavement, all the things that have to happen in warmer weather. But again, we're pretty confident this time that September 21 is going to be the date that this gets put to bed.
You're going to do a field trip out to this, Senator Mazza?
Yeah, we'll have to do that. I have to see that. It'd be interesting to see, seriously. Now the bridge on our right, that's gone. That's coming out, right? That's gone.
The bridge on the right is the new bridge. So it's almost complete. You can see the date on the picture is December 2nd, 20.
Oh.
That's a year ago. So it's the new bridge.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
not completed yet. The one on the left is the new bridge, and both lanes of traffic is on that bridge right now. So I figured I'd put my 10G reporting with the programs as I go through them. So there was one new project reported on the 10G report, and this is a pretty simple explanation. We have a pretty large maintenance and preservation project for I-91 between St. Johnsbury and Fairleigh. And we decided to break out the project and make two separate projects based on the work type for each. One of them has more bridge work, and the other ones are more paving and membraning. And we felt like we would get a better slug of contractors bidding on the projects and better pricing. So we broke it into another project. So it was reported as new. The closed or completed projects, I'll show you some pictures of these at the end, but these are just the ones that I reported last year that we were going to be constructing, and now they're completed. The expanded costs, that's one of great interest. We had a couple of those on the interstate this year, and these are the maintenance and preservation projects. And you can see that the cost did go up quite a bit relative to what it started at. And my explanation for these is that these maintenance and preservation projects are really difficult to nail down the extent of what we're gonna find when we open up some of the, the pavements or the joints to really see what the limits of the damage is. So what I'm finding this year, and I have my engineer running reports on change orders on just how difficult it is to get an estimate right out of the gate when we don't have the liberties of really seeing what's underneath the pavement. So Those are the two, Brattleboro and Springfield. With that, I'll go on to the State Highway Bridge Program. This year, we're funded at just under $50 million, which is quite a bit less than last year. It's funded 67 projects with 36 of those funded for construction. I'm starting to report out for Federal Highway on our large culvert inventory because we do have some low ratings in the culverts across the state, both interstate and state. So I figured I would keep you all informed as well as we are trying to address those deficiencies. So this year, 9 large culverts are included in these construction projects. And then 13 large culverts, and we're going to be getting more. I've just been working with Pam on selecting projects to work on over the next few years. 13 culverts are being brought into the program for engineering and to be put out for construction. So I'm happy to report, I just met with Todd Kimball from FHWA last week, and he's very pleased with our culvert program. I have dedicated staff to that program to report out stats on how we are accomplishing this. And like I said, he's just thrilled and is a great partner in the effort. Again, to keep our bridges in good repair, there's 15 projects for preservation funded right now to be, that's going to be out in this summer. And then we have 2 bridges with our neighbors in New Hampshire that we're working on. So again, it's we're down significantly from last year, just over 18 million. So again, anyone that has heard this presentation in the last 2 years has seen a lot on Middlebury. With that winding down, we're getting back down to normal numbers. North Hero Grand Isle continues to be the big drawer in the program right now, as you know, we're spending 20.2 million this year on that project. A couple of the projects that we have put out that are new is a bridge in Proctor over the rail line, and that's going to be starting construction this summer. There's a culvert in Essex. I think that's the wrong road, but I'll have to check that. But that has had problems over the year with some settlement, so we're addressing that with a new structure. And then we have 2 large culverts on Route 100 in Plymouth that are going to be under construction this summer. We have $2.6 million construction funding for maintenance and preservation projects. So those 15 projects are accounting for the 2.6 million, and I believe there's line items for more to be identified. There was a couple projects ready for construction, but we pushed them out a year, you know, due to we were always hoping for more funding, and when we didn't get that, so we carefully selected which projects would be put out later, and those are the 3 that we selected this time. But again, these projects are shovel ready and will be put out to bid as soon as possible.
Did Senator Kitchell ever get her snowmobile bridge figured out? Talking about bridges over to New Hampshire.
Where they wanted to make it a one lane bridge. No, actually what they, part of what they were proposing is to allow that to happen and use so that there would not have to be an expensive replacement of that bridge, and have the exits configured on the Interstate 93 to avoid that upgrade that's going to have to occur on that old bridge. But no, I think that's still in abeyance, and I don't ever know what happened on the New Hampshire side with their Department of Transportation pushing for that project.
I can give you a short update on that because I do know a fair bit about that bridge.
Oh,
So-
good, Kristen. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a fairly substantial bridge that goes across the Connecticut there.
Yeah, it's in Waterford, right?
Right. Mhm.
Okay. Yep, it's being scoped right now. So we agreed to work together to scope it. The unique thing about New Hampshire projects is we really own and are fiscally responsible for a very small portion of them, because it's from the water line on
Yeah.
our side. And so it's ends up, they don't like that. We do, they don't like it.
Mhm.
So
I think it's their just desserts.
right, but our just desserts could be paying full cost of an interchange upgrade because that's on our side.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the fiscal implications of Vermont doing
Right.
this alternative proposal. Yeah.
So, so it's still in the planning phases, and we're very conscientious of, what it means to abandon the bridge and then, be fully responsible for the interchange. So there'll be more on that, I'm sure, because I'm pretty sure New Hampshire is going to be pushing for that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, you're right. The interchanges to route the traffic off onto the interstate bridge would all fall to Vermont. So that is, I'm sure, I don't know what the calculus is on that relative to the percentage of the replacement of the bridge.
yeah, most of the time, I don't have the number up, but it's, we'll say we would pay 5% of the whole bridge because we own 5% of that. And then anything, and if the abutment, which usually is in our property, we would pay for that. So it's quite a bit of money that we save by not owning a lot of the bridge. So anyway, I'll move on to, but I'll keep you posted, Senator Kitchell. I see you're interested in that as things arise there.
Well, don't forget, I'm also on the Governor's Snowmobile Council.
What model snowmobile do you
I
own?
didn't know you were a rider.
That's what I'm trying to figure out what kind she owns.
Yeah, well, I've been invited to ride the groomer. Does that count?
There. All right.
That would be my preference.
Yeah.
A little safer. Okay, so Senator Mazza, here's your North Hero Grand Isle construction
Wow.
up.
What a project. Wow.
I know, and we didn't get any favors from the environment with the.
I guess not. Yay. Wow.
Yeah, but it is, it's moving forward, and we just have to get past these things, and there'll be requirements for monitoring and treatment. I believe they have to, cover it and try to contain it.
All because it's a drawbridge.
But anyway, it is moving forward, and we finally have seen some construction of permanent features, which is always exciting. And here's a good one. I got some pictures of the Middlebury Tunnel project. What a summer we had. Here's some stats on how much excavation, how many road trips. The 26,000 cubic yards doesn't really speak to people, but if you can imagine 2,600 trucks driving through Middlebury to
That was
dispose.
an amazing project and little complaints, all praises, and wow, I have not been down. I wanted to make it this fall, but I haven't. But I understand it was just a model. Everyone is so pleased, and the town works so well, and wow, just great.
Yeah, it is one that we should be really proud of. And in the heat of the whole COVID outbreak, the
Yeah.
shutdown was supposed to occur just after Memorial Day, and that got pushed back. And it was, I can tell you that I was really nervous. And the silver lining of this pandemic is, the rail didn't have as much traffic. So there was no conflicts with an Amtrak on the Eastern Corridor, interrupting the freights from the Western trying to make their round trip, so all in all, the rail detour went off without a hitch. And, we were very nervous about getting people trained because one day they're in training sitting next to each other in locomotives, and the next day they're sent home with no training. So it was very stressful. The second bullet here about the precast, if you can imagine, you see the size of it, 422 of those pieces being trucked down, it's one at a time through downtown and backed in and set in place. So really remarkable. Here's just another picture of the tunnel as it's being installed. You can see, I mean, it's got horizontal geometry that had to be correct and matched, and a vertical geometry that had to be matched. So, you know, a lot of work went into the planning, and we were all nervous about the fit up, but things went together really well. And here's one of the happiest days of my summer, was going to witness this, where the train actually came through the completed tunnel. The secretary cutting the ribbon on Vermont 30 as they opened that road too. And we're always happy to be able to celebrate opening 2 days ahead of schedule.
Wow, that was close.
Well, you know, they time it pretty well, and it's to their advantage to get some extra work done. So
Oh, that's good. No, that's unbelievable for that size project. Yeah.
yeah. So this is not the finished project because it's not quite finished yet, but next year it'll be fun to compare this rendering that was done to what it actually looks like. So I'll be looking for a drone shot from this vantage point, and we can compare.
It's that close to the church then, right? And well, that's pretty
yeah.
close. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Senator Mazza.
Yes, right ahead.
I'm always looking for excuses to get out of the house these days in this pandemic, and you are setting my road trip agenda for this spring with the kids. So I'm going to go visit all these projects and take photos.
I'll be sure to call the agency and they'll give you the great tour.
Gee, I thought we could take the train.
Love to. We can plan that. We'd be glad to do that. When the weather gets nice, we'll make that a point. Because like I said, I haven't seen it. I really wanted to see it, and I heard so much good about it. But the closest we got to it, we had that hearing in Montpelier. Remember, the folks showed up.
That was, I remember that. It was one of my first experiences with it.
Yeah, there was only one person complained that day, and everybody was in favor of it. Wonderful.
Yep. Yeah. So next year we'll compare before and after pictures, and we'll see how close they came with the rendering.
Yeah.
An environmental and engineering standpoint. So the 10G reports for State Highway Bridge, you know, some new projects were added. Primarily, they are permanent repairs of structures that were damaged during the Halloween storm. You can see the top three. That's the case.
Kristen,
Yes?
you might want to remind some of us what a 10G project is.
10G. Well, these are new projects that were added this year that you folks did not see last year. So they're new to our program. So that's what these reports are.
And the 10G is in reference to a requirement that you tell us about these. That's my recollection, right?
Yes. Yep. We are obligated to report out on these every year. And I include them in my presentation. This is the first year I've actually lined them up with the program. I think it's easier just to do it this way. Last year, my 10G report really focused on the Middlebury expansion and costs. So I'm actually relieved to be able to be talking just normal project additions and extra costs. So New Hampshire, you know, when they're ready to do a project, they alert us and we add it. So the next two are just maintenance projects on Vermont, New Hampshire bridges. And then the 15 new bridge preservation and maintenance projects that were programmed over the summer in anticipation. We were anticipating maybe some stimulus funds, so we wanted to get ahead of it. So we got things ready. And so now they'll be put out this year under a normal funding. I have one expanded cost, and that's in the State Highway Bridge Program. It's a Bennington project, and this is the one where there were some issues with the construction from a firm that had constructed the project back in the 90s. And there was some rebar that was cut. And so when the project was programmed, the estimate was pretty low, and we didn't really know the extent of the damage. And this year we do. So a revised estimate was put in, and I believe we are seeking reimbursements from the contractor to make these repairs to keep. Basically what we want to do is bring the pier back to the strength that it was designed for. is a fun slide because it's just about our completed project. So you can read all those. I'll be showing some pictures later in the presentation of some of the more spectacular ones. But you'll see like Moortown, that bridge was reduced to one lane a couple of years ago, and people were up in arms about it, wanting to have that replaced. So we got that, and I'll show you pictures of it. And then same with the Georgia. Remember the truck hit the guardrail and it had to be reduced to one lane, and so we replaced that project as well, along with some others. Town Highway Bridge Programs funded just under 15 million. So that funds 31 projects with 14 heading to construction this year. 3 projects are the Connecticut River bridges. And this year we were working on 2 covered bridge projects, one in Clarendon, and then that one in Salisbury, Cornwall that burnt. We're working with the town and scoping that project to see what an appropriate replacement would be for that area. I'm happy to report that the program is up from last year. Over the last couple of years, I've been reporting that my intention is to build it back. You know, after these projects from the state system relax, we can put a little bit more money in here and make sure this is funded at a respectable value. The Brattleboro-Hinsdale is the biggie here, and it's advertising this winter. In fact, it should be in a few weeks. And that construction estimate is 57.5 million, with Vermont share at 16. And
How do you determine that? You take the length of the bridge and divide it, so you split the cost, or?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's, you know, it's based on how much of the bridge is actually across that water line on the bank in Vermont. So for this bridge, we are paying 20% because it actually extends pretty far into Vermont because it's raised and crossing over a rail line.
That must be an interesting discussion. I imagine, because everybody doesn't want to pay too much, but yet someone has to determine where the line is, right?
Yep, that line was determined many, many years ago.
Okay.
And so, you know, the line is the line, and you know, they enjoyed the river for logging, and now we enjoy the reduced share for building bridges. But you know, it's, and my next slide is actually an overhead view of what the bridge is going to look like. So
good.
I don't want to ruin it, but it's going to be really exciting, and I can point out some features that have been super challenging for us. So here's just some towns that are going to benefit from the program this year. Newberry has a bridge on Boltonville Road that's been a problem. It's been a maintenance headache for them. Last year, I got a call from a nice older gentleman, very concerned that it had potholes, and so we pushed for the development of that to get it out, so they wouldn't have to keep pumping money into it. The rail was in bad shape as well. We have a project in Burke, another one in Enosburg. The New Fane Arch Bridge is, it won't actually be in construction this summer, but it's advertising later in the summer. And that's so that this is going to be a brand new precast arch. So there's a lot of engineering that has to occur by the contractor to, you know, construct the arch, fabricate the arch. So we decided to move the advertising date to summer and put some requirements on submittals so that we can make sure that we're giving it the due review it deserves during the winter months and are not being held by, you know, weather dates in approving the structure. So, but it's coming out. And then we have a bridge in Pulteney that was recently closed, and that one is going to be advertised this fall. So again, the last two aren't going to be breaking ground this summer, but they will be in the contractor's hands this summer, which should be assuring to the folks that are concerned with these two structures. So here's our Brattleboro-Hinsdale Bridge, and you can see, I'll use my cursor. This is the old bridge. They come over here, they cross a truss, vehicles hit an island, turn a sharp corner, and then cross another truss into Brattleboro. Then they cross over the rail line at grade, and then they hit Malfunction Junction. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. And then traffic backs up. If there's a train here, it's a nightmare. So the new bridge back here will come and do a nice sweeping curve and touch down in Vermont.
Wow.
And you can see, you know, the old bridge over here, look how much is very small piece in Vermont. You know, the water line's right along the bank here. In fact, they drew it here. But the new bridge, because it has to be raised up to cross over this rail line, doesn't even touch down till practically Vernon Street. So we're going to own more of this bridge, and as a result, we're also paying more for its construction. But and you can see in this area, this is another challenge. This whole area right here that I'm circling, that's an oil tank distribution farm. So you can imagine we're literally building a pier in the middle of it. So we've had to acquire rights for it. You know, we have to consider the type of soils that are, you know, around an oil farm, distribution farm. So it's been a challenge in right of way. We also have a building over here, if you can see my cursor, that was recently purchased, and we're affecting a lot of parking. And so you must know that affecting parking lots ends up being engineering, you know, challenges and financial challenges at best. So this will start this year, and but most of the work will be in New Hampshire as far as the bridge, and Vermont will just be doing some utility relocations.
Does the old bridge, Senator Mazza, if it's okay, does the old bridge come out, or do you keep that?
No, because you know, the old bridges are trusses, so they are deemed historically significant. So the plan right now is to restore them to a condition good enough for bike and pedestrian use, which, you know, skill upgrades and some painting, and then turn that into a recreational path to cross over into New Hampshire. So that's really planning phases still.
So that whole island, then, it belongs to New Hampshire.
It does.
Uh-huh.
Senator Mazza.
We've taken their land before. Want to go for that island?
Save a lot of money if we don't, I can tell you that right now. And they want us to participate in island work, and I'm pushing back on it right now.
Senator Mazza, if I may.
Senator Ingalls, go ahead.
Are New Hampshire and Vermont always agree to which projects that they're going to put forth? Is it always pretty agreeable?
It's more agreeable about the projects we're going to put forth. It's not always agreeable about the treatments. But you know, we get along pretty well. It's always good to have strong discussion. You know, they always feel that, you know, we should be paying more. In fact, they wanted us to pay half of this rehabilitation on the other structures, which I didn't agree to. So, you know, my commitment to this part of the structure, which I felt was generous, was to pay 20% of the total bridge rehab, and not just my 3% of this part. You know, and I felt that, you know, Vermont will benefit from that. It's in our best interest to have a nice facility like that. So that's as far as I went, and the rest will just be a normal project. So New Hampshire would be responsible for anything they have to do to this area to make it bike friendly. Okay, I'll move on to. So town highway is pretty easy. We didn't add any projects. Pam and I have talked about a few that we're going to bring in for next year. Didn't have any significant overruns, so that's good. And then the completed projects are a project in Eden and Orleans. Orleans was pretty spectacular since it was right in the village, and I'll get to some pictures of that at the end.
Well, Senator Ingalls would be familiar with that.
Oh, good. You'll like the pictures. I try to show nice pictures and make people, you know, I like to end on happiness.
Well, we can use that.
Yeah, we need happiness.
I'll do my best. So I always report out on the Accelerated Bridge Program, and I'm sure that there's some new folks that could stand a little lesson on this. But anyway, Accelerated Bridge Program was endorsed in 2012 by Secretary Searles. We brought it to the legislature and reported out on it. And we had a dedicated team management to that program. To date, we are at 98 projects, so I'm just waiting to get to the 3 digits here, 100. 44% of all of our projects in structures ends up using some form of accelerated bridge construction. We just crossed over 200 million in total costs for the program, and we have a 96% on time for bridge openings. So, you know, if you're too low, then, you know, people are upset, but if you're too high, people are asking, you know, we're too generous to the contractor. So I think 96% is good. I know which ones didn't open up on time, and anyone who lives up in Chittenden County knows that a couple of the interstate bridge deck projects last year had a couple-hour delay. But when you're trying to put a bridge together in 59 hours, things don't always go according to the schedule. This year I included a map because this is what I send to towns that are not necessarily in favor of a project in their community for whatever reason. In the beginning, we were accused of picking on certain areas of the state. So this map is simply to show that, you know, we really don't discriminate. It's where it makes sense. So if it's Northeast Kingdom, the Southeast, Chittenden, Middlebury, wherever, if we can do it, that's what we're going to do because it makes sense. I do always report out on the road closures for each year. So this year, the roads listed here will be closing, and the communities are well aware. Some of them, like Burke and Enosburg, they're already closed. So there's no sense in putting out a project that says you have to, you know, complete it in 14 days. I mean, it does cost a little bit more money to accelerate projects like that. But you can see Addison, which is a culvert replacement on Vermont 125, you know, we are getting that accelerated, you know, 2 weeks you get to take that out and put it in because, you know, we don't want to keep that road out of service too long. And you can see down in Plymouth, we have a 7-day closure. So we try to choose those durations very carefully because, you know, a 59-hour bridge closure costs a lot of money, but a 21-day bridge closure doesn't cost quite as much. If you can keep them from using lights or having to have an extra force out there, it goes a long way in saving money. So we find that, you know, 21 days is a palatable number, and then we go from there. So here we're going to get into some pictures. This is the fun part. So, you know, this group of pictures is the Accelerated Bridge Program. So this picture up here, it's the top left, is the Moortown Bridge. And that was the one that was one lane on that hairpin turn that had the light, and people were afraid that it was going to cause problems with skiers and folks heading into the Mad River. But a lot of it was precast, and you can see over on the right, we use these skinny little panels to form the deck. And the advantage there is, you know, it's quicker, and we don't have to, you know, pull plywood off the bottom of the bridge after. And, you know, if you can imagine doing that over a river, you know, you need to have certain accesses. The bottom left picture comes directly from the Georgia project this year. And you can see these are sections of the abutment that was precast, and, you know, these loops are, you know, they're set in by cranes and then grouted, or we use a concrete to kind of marry the sections together. But this is now really standard practice in our state, and, you know, we're considered a lead state nationally for accelerated bridge construction. This is actually a project from last year, but because some folks are new to the committee, I thought, you know, these are the full depth deck panels. This is at the Colchester site where they had to lift these into place, during that 59-hour closure. So in 59 hours, they had to remove the deck, prepare the beams, and then set these panels, and there was quite a few of them, and then, join them. So, exciting stuff in my world. I told you I was going to talk about a couple emergency responses. These are always fun and stressful, but they get wafted in when you least expect it. Nobody expected for Georgia to be shut to one lane with sinkholes, and so that came into my camp shortly after the storm, when it was determined that the damage was too much for a simple repair. I think last year I talked about the off-ramp. That was the first project we got involved with. And then across the entire barrel became a problem. And so this just highlights some folks that worked really hard and some of the innovation that we came up with to take care of the problem. I mean, obviously, replacing a really deep culvert is a lot of work, and it generally would take an open cut and crossovers and supports to support a deep excavation. So Nick Wark was assigned to oversee the project. He was also a hydraulics engineer, so he was the best choice to make sure that we could push a liner through. And to line a culvert, you need a lot of collaboration, and you work very close with the regulating agencies. So this was a $6 million project that came in last year, and we had it out and complete by summer. So it was literally weeks in design. Duxbury, not quite as spectacular, but this is just just a smaller culvert that things are happening. It's on Route 100, and there's just not a lot of options for bypasses. So I assigned it to Rob, who is Accelerated Bridge Project Program Manager, and he quickly put a project together, and we put it out under an IDIQ contract. And so that was taken care of quickly. Here are some pictures of the Georgia project and the Duxbury project. And you can see the Duxbury here on the left is just really wooded and remote. This is the culvert. You can see, it's really deep, so it's tough to get at those. And you have to open cut the entire road to get at it. So you need to take traffic off. And I didn't get any complaints about that, and it was well warned. We do a really good job of putting out signage and having direct public outreach about it. People are at least warned.
That culvert there is embedded in concrete on the outside, then metal on the inside.
Yep, this is the Georgia culvert. So, and I got another slide that's going to show you what happened, but this was what we decided to do, and as we decided to push a smaller culvert through.
Oh.
Then we, put concrete grout mix around the whole thing to secure it. And
That'll
then
last a long time.
it will last a long time. It reduces the size. So that's where we always have to have the conversations with, regulators, the organic organism passage, floodways. We certainly don't want to be backing up water. So we had to do all that analysis before we could really consider a treatment like this. But we brought A&R in immediately and worked together. We learned that when we're all involved in the decision, it's easy. This is the Georgia project again. So I'm going to start with the project on the left down here, but see this hole? This is a hole that was in the existing pipe.
Wow.
So water's coming through the pipe and it's going out of that hole. And when it goes out of the hole, it gets into the the organic or the sub base of the road and starts to wash it away.
How long would that pipe have been in there?
Since the 60s.
Wow.
So it's been in there a long time. And, there's always a question of what kind of water is coming through some of these pipes, because they seem to disintegrate quickly. So, there's a lot of chemicals in water. There's a lot of runoff, that ends up in these streams. So there's a lot of reasons why metals deteriorate quickly. So anyway, so it was this water seeping out of the pipe and migrating those fines out from under the roadbed that was causing the sinkholes. So again, we pushed the pipe through. This is before they grouted it. And up here on the right, you can see, getting down to where they can push a pipe through, you're literally pushing sections of pipe through a pipe. You need to build roads and accesses. So we did all of that and, had to be sure that we documented everything properly to get right of way taken care of in the event that we were on private property. And there was a couple places, but again, we did the outreach and they knew, and then we followed through with a process to compensate. This left, shows injection grouting. So, what happens is, there's all these voids under the interstate and, we don't really know where they are. You see them, once you see the sinkholes, you get an idea where they are. So we had to have a firm come in do some ground penetrating radar to kind of get a map of where these voids could be and come up with a layout for injecting this grout down into holes to fill it. So we want to end up, now that we've stopped the water from coming through, we want to fill the holes that are there and make a subbase that's strong and resilient and that can support the interstate. So that's what this operation is up here. And, it was new to us. So it was a little innovation there and it worked really well. And they could easily, once the grout got to a certain pressure, that was the indicator that the hole was filled. So if you put the machine down in and you're getting high pressures, then there's not a hole. So they did that pretty quickly and the interstate was opened. So hopefully no issues in Georgia anymore. So finally, here's some just before and after projects from last year. So the top one here is that little box culvert type structure, under I-89 in Bolton. Now during the project development process, there was a lot of concern with pedestrian use, it's long trail access. There was, they were really lobbying for a new bridge, but I mean, you can look at that structure on the left and, we've seen worse. So, our feeling was, there is still life in this structure and we have many more assets that we need to address. So what we did is we improved it from a safety standpoint. So now it's lit, it's painted. Some of the deficiencies in the structure were repaired. You can see up on the left there some exposed rebar and
That's single lane.
Yeah, it's always it's single lane still. But now, and you can see the pedestrians, when they're walking through, they push the button and the lights flash. Or it's censored. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a sensor. It senses,
Stops traffic. Okay.
yeah, well, and it alerts a vehicle that there's something going on and there's a pedestrian in there.
Yeah.
But you can see the difference in the lighting. I don't know. I'm sure some of it is the shading, but this one's more at night. But it is dark inside. So we go to these public meetings and we hear what they're saying, and we do is try to correct it the best we can.
Yeah.
Eden was a bridge that was removed. I think it was removed by the town because it was in such bad shape. So this is just a new bridge on the town highway system. You can see it's very simple structure, but very easy to maintain that. This is a culvert replacement. A lot of the culverts, I choose some of these just to show you that, when the roads are built, these metal culverts are put in. And as we now are more environmentally conscious and we have to consider, increased velocities and what climate change is going to do to our waterways, we end up having to replace them with really large structures. This is basically a bridge. So this is what we're up against. Something like this is pretty cheap. where your replacement costs are quite a bit more to put a concrete structure. Now, this is a 100-year structure where a pipe absolutely would not be. So just to give you an idea of, you know, when I say we have a problem with our culvert inventory, we can't just take them out and replace them. Sometimes they become this, and that's a bigger effort. This was a accelerated bridge project last year in Putney that I think it was a 10-day closure of Route 5 to replace the deck. That went very well. Had, you know, a couple of small issues, but overall project went off without a hitch and the bridge opened on time. That was a very aggressive closure, to be honest with you. This is a picture of the Georgia before and after. You can see up in the left, the Jersey barrier that was put in place to keep the traffic away from the rail that was ruined by that truck. It didn't take much to ruin it, I don't think, but still, so that reduced it to one lane. And we came back with a brand new bridge, nice safe rail. This is a metallized beam, so it's got a lot of life in its coating. So very happy with that. And the project was expedited through design very quickly. Here's your Orleans Bridge.
There, Senator Ingalls, you should be standing on there, you know?
We've been very happy with that bridge.
Excellent. No, this was a good bridge, and you know, there's just a lot of buildings and foundations. So whenever you're in a downtown area, you know, there's a lot to contend with. And I believe there was a rail line up the street a little ways, a crossing, and so.
My best friend manages that town, so we know it well.
Excellent. Well, happy to serve you there. This is a bridge in Bethel that I was happy to see replaced. I live somewhat close to this bridge, but a couple of years ago, a truck came across this bridge out of control and went off just as they crossed over. But this rail was so flimsy, it was from a long time ago, it could have been a different story. So, and it's, you know, a structure that we wouldn't want to keep in service. So that one got replaced, and this is the new structure. It's at over Gilead Brook. Oops, I'm trying to get rid of the thing. And again, another bridge in Dover, and this just highlights, you know, again, like look how long this bridge is, the new bridge compared to what was there. So
You have to accommodate pedestrians on most of these bridges and bike paths, or everyone you do?
yeah, I mean, it's always considered, and shoulder widths are
Okay.
adjusted appropriately based on, you know, the type of use, and
Right.
mostly for bicycles. So we do, we coordinate with Mr. Kaplan over in the bike ped coordinate section and make sure that what we're putting forward will meet the needs of the future there. Hey, that's it for me. So at this point, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Great job. Great overview. Questions?
Yeah.
Any committee members have any questions? Wow, you did such a good job. There's no questions.
Well, I was waiting for Senator Kitchell, honestly, to notice that my trending graph went from left to right this year. I felt really bad about that last year when you noticed it again.
Sorry.
She's
Oh,
picky
I
like that, you know?
All I had
I'm
to do,
sorry. I let you down, Kristen.
well, it's from left to right now. So all I had to do was ask for the data that way. Go figure. I thought I was gonna be upsetting someone. But I said, hey, can we push this around? She goes, oh, here you go. I was like, oh, okay.
Senator Chittenden, anything from Chittenden?
Nothing comes to mind. Great presentation, though.
Okay.
Oh, is it all about Chittenden?
I try not to make it all about Chittenden.
Well, that's what he ran on. He promised all these bridges and they all came through. So that's what it was.
Oh,
I
oh,
talked about interstate exchanges, but not necessarily bridges.
oh.
Senator Ingalls said, I'll take care of that bridge when he ran for election. I'll take care of that, he said. So
I said, that's done. That project's done.
that's all done. I got it through.
Yes.
Well, you all know how to reach me or And I'll be happy to jump back on, explain anything, or email.
You always do
Are
a
you
great
working
job,
from
Chris.
home, Kristen? Are
Yeah,
you
they
working-
wouldn't let me show you my background, but it is fabulous. Yeah, I'm working from home. I have a really nice setup, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, aren't you lucky?
What are we missing in the background here?
My kitchen cabinets, which are fairly new,
Okay, yeah,
but I alternate. Sometimes I take a meeting in the other room where I have pictures in the background. But I have a nice work environment. My husband has to go to work every day, so I'm here by myself.
well, you get rid of him all day, so you got the house to yourself.
Rid of him all day, but then he comes home and he's like looking like I'm gonna make dinner or something. I'm like, but I do sometimes. Yeah. But
Anything-
no, it's been a challenge, but there's been some good. I think there's been some good outcomes. Like this medium for doing business is really well. We've been meeting with utility companies like this, and when you can go face to face, it
Yeah.
changes the conversation. So
Yeah,
a lot more meetings this way.
yeah, that's true.
So we
Well,
got to
thank you
take the
again.
best parts of this and use it going forward, I think.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Anything else this morning, Liz, or are we done?
Oops. Sorry, we are complete, done. You
Good.
did great.
All right.
Could I ask Liz
Yeah.
a question?
Sure.
Please.
I'm trying to go through so many emails. You sent us the PowerPoint from the budget.
I believe I did. Want me to resend you? I'll resend you anything you want.
Okay, well, yeah, that kind of went through by various divisions within the agency, what their budget requests. I followed it on the screen, but I couldn't find it as one. I know you'd sent out a couple of emails.
Is it on the committee information page?
Oh, it could be.
I'll send you today's. You want today's documents? Happy to send that right away.
I'm keeping kind of a separate file for the 22 budget
Okay.
apart from the other. So I put reports in one file and budget stuff in another.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, folks, you can have your
And
lunch.
we're,
Yes.
and then
anything
we're
else?
back on the floor at 1.
1 o'clock, right? 1 o'clock.
Yes.
Anything else anybody has? Thank you for all joining us this morning. It was a great job, and I hope it was informative to everybody as well as to me. But like I said, we'll still discuss some of these issues as we move on, but at least it gives you a good overview of what's happening. Gives you an update, but there's a lot of material, but for the new members, don't think you're overburdened. It'll all come to you sooner or later. And it's a very interesting department. A lot of stuff moving in our state that we don't think about, but
When exactly is the midterm exam, Senator Mazza?
yeah, right. Senator Kitchell's going to give you that. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
I feel
Well,
like I get the comprehensives at the end of the year when I have to present
So, yeah.
all these budgets.
How's the cat doing next door, Jane? All right.
Well, fortunately, Nathaniel, we could go offline now since we're done.
Yeah. We're all done.
Okay, I'm going to take you off.
Yeah.
Just one moment.